Today's video is the story of me applying to get my son's proof of Canadian citizenship. He was born in Lithuania, and his mother's Lithuanian, so he is a Lithuanian citizen. However, I'm Canadian, and Canada's rules allow me to pass on my Canadian citizenship to him as well, even if he was born outside the country. But because he was born outside of Canada, it was a little bit of a process to get all this sorted out. So here's the story of that process. I guess first off, if you follow Lithuanian news, you'll know that the referendum to amend the Lithuanian constitution to allow for dual citizenship recently failed. This would have allowed Lithuanian expats to keep their non-Lithuanian citizenship and perhaps regain the Lithuanian citizenship they would have had to renounce. So for example, many Lithuanians have migrated to the US over the past few decades, and many of them have even become American citizens. But Lithuanian law does not allow for dual citizenship, except in certain circumstances, and so these American Lithuanians most likely had to give up their Lithuanian citizenship/passports to become Americans. So it's safe to say that there are a lot of adults out there who will have to choose Lithuanian citizenship or something else. However, you may be interested to know that there was an amendment to the law on citizenship that came into effect in November 2015. This amendment allows people who have acquired citizenship of Lithuania and another country by birth to have dual citizenship. As an official government website says, such people, upon reaching the age of 21, will not need to choose a passport of which country to keep because this law provides them with the possibility to possess dual citizenship. I think later on in this video I'll talk a little bit about why we chose to pursue all this paperwork to get his Canadian proof of citizenship, because in reality we don't really need it in any day-to-day practical sense. But first, let me go through the whole process as set out by the Government of Canada. So it felt long and complicated, but I'll try and summarize it quickly, or maybe I'll just speed it all up, or maybe you can just skip to this point in the video to get to our trip to the Canadian Embassy. But first we had to print out and complete Form CIT-0001. This file is 13 pages, but only 8 of these pages are the actual form. A lot of my details were expected, like my personal information as well as my wife's, but I then had to fill out my parents' details. It could have been more complicated if I was requesting a name change or if our son was adopted, and strangely, if people leave Canada for more than a year before 1977, this would also have complicated things. Along with completing Form CIT-0001, there were other things listed on the CIT-0014 checklist. So in addition to the form, we needed 2 original photos printed to a specific size set by the Canadian government. To this day, I am so surprised with how large Canadian passport photos need to be compared to other countries. Does 5 by 7 centimeters seem big to you? It does to me. And then the date, our son's name, and the name and address of the photo studio had to be written on the back of the photos. And then next, my son needed 2 pieces of valid identification. But we only had 1 piece of ID from the list. He's a little too young for his driver's license, you know? Referring to yet another document, the guide says if you're applying on behalf of a minor who does not have 2 pieces of ID or does not have a photo ID, please include an explanation letter with the application. And so then I had to draft an explanation letter to simply state out that my son is just a few months old and only has his Lithuanian passport. And then I had to pay a fee in advance online and then print out the proof of payment and attach it to the application. But wait, there's even more. We had to get my son's birth certificate, but since it was all in Lithuanian, we had to take it to a translation service and then have it notarized, and then I needed to get color copies of things that proved I was a Canadian citizen. Ultimately, getting everything ready required 2 to 3 trips to a photocopy shop and 1 trip to the mall for photos, and then 2 trips to the translation service, 1 for drop-off and another for pickup. I don't know if you've ever had to do something like this, but for me, it's always a stressful process. I hate filling out government forms that are long, tedious, and require really detailed information. I mean, who doesn't hate that? But it's not that I'm incapable of doing it, it's just the high stakes that stresses me out. Like, what if you do all this work and then you find out 3 months later that you made a small mistake and you need to start over again? That would just be awful. Ultimately, I am certain that my son is a citizen of Canada because it's passed down through me, but applying to get proof of this citizenship has been such an ordeal. Anyways, once we were ready, I emailed the Canadian Embassy to schedule an appointment, and so on a warm sunny morning in June, we went over to the embassy to get all these papers submitted. I probably could have just gone myself, but just in case there were any questions about my wife, I wanted her to be there as well, and then that meant our son had to come along too. We walked from home to the embassy. The weather was lovely that day, and the city seemed to be slowly coming alive with people arriving to their places of work. We headed up to the embassy, which is pretty much a small, tiny office on the 7th floor of a business center. I was kind of surprised to encounter a native English-speaking Canadian this time around. All of my previous experiences were with someone who I would assume was a local. The difference in terms of friendliness and warmth was so obvious. With the person I thought was Lithuanian, she was very professional and very polite, but this Canadian woman was so cheerful and friendly, while also still being professional. She even joked that we had to submit our son for the application as well. I made a video a while back about Lithuanians being more reserved, and this to me was a pretty good example of the difference. There's nothing at all wrong with the reserved attitude and personality, but I know for me and what I'm used to, that warm, friendly attitude combined with a bit of humor totally put me at ease with this otherwise stressful process. Anyways, that is the story of how a Canadian parent has to submit paperwork to get a citizenship certificate for a child who is born outside of Canada. There is an online application method, but it's not available to everyone, and it depends on the circumstances. And then so, big picture, why am I going through all this trouble? Well, I think to make a long story short, it's pretty much because I can. I mean, if my son has the ability to have Canadian citizenship, why not, right? Are there any downsides? None that I can think of. When he's old enough to make those big life decisions, having this other citizenship will just offer him another set of opportunities, in addition to those available with a Lithuanian passport. With these dual citizenship situations, I'm also reminded about the video I made about conscription for Lithuanians, and specifically on this subject, I think of all the YouTube comments from young Lithuanians saying that they were going to get a different citizenship to avoid their mandatory military service. Now, for me, I hate this attitude. I get that it comes from young people who aren't aware of the importance of this kind of duty, but as someone who was in the military at a young age, I think military service does have value. And with Lithuania in the position that it's in, I think it has even more value here. So I personally wouldn't want my son to be one of those individuals attempting to renounce their Lithuanian citizenship just to avoid conscription. I mean, I would even encourage him to join, whether it's full-time or part-time through the KASP. But I guess those kinds of decisions are quite far away, for now. So what do you think of the idea of having dual citizenship? Is it something you would want for yourself and or your children? Do let me know by leaving a comment. As always, thanks for watching.